Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than my normal content. This video is going to be in more of a video essay format, and I'm going to be discussing the movie Promising Young Woman and recommending you books based on that movie. So if you loved Promising Young Woman as much as I did, I'm sure that there will be a book in this video that you will also enjoy. Not only am I going to be giving you recommendations based on the movie, but I'm going to be kind of going a bit more in depth about each one of the books and how I draw connections from the book to Promising Young Woman. Each sort of element that I have identified in the movie will get its own book related to that element. I just want to put out a big spoiler warning for the movie Promising Young Woman. This video is really for people who have watched the movie and really liked it and want something similar. So if you haven't watched the movie, you should probably go watch that and then come back so you really understand what I'm talking about in terms of the themes and central ideas. I also want to put out a trigger warning here. The movie Promising Young Woman, as well as some of these books, discuss topics of sexual assault. So if that is something that is triggering to you, I would recommend skipping this video. And if you see me looking down, I have my laptop here for my notes, so just don't mind that. So the film Promising Young Woman follows a character named Cassie, and she is very affected by something that happened to her best friend Nina in college. She knew Nina her entire life, and they went to college together. They were in medical school. Nina went to a party by herself without Cassie, and she got very intoxicated, and she ended up getting raped by a character named Al Monroe. This event has totally shaped Cassie's life in that she ended up leaving medical school when Nina did to take care of her. She ends up working at a small coffee shop. She's still living with her parents as she's turning 30 years old, and she really doesn't have a direction that she seems to be going. She feels a lot of guilt that she wasn't there for what happened to Nina. She didn't go with her, she couldn't save her. And her way of kind of making up for that is to find men who are the nice guys in various clubs and bars and go home with them. Every time she'll pretend that she is very drunk, and every time a man who seems to be a nice guy comes over in the guise of trying to help her and ends up taking her back to his apartment. As soon as those men start to try anything with her, she will come out of her pretending to be drunk and will tell them that she's totally sober. Because she can't directly get revenge on the man who hurt Nina, she does so by trying to affect the lives of other men who are doing similar things. So this kind of becomes habitual for her. But one day, a man named Ryan comes into the coffee shop to get a cup of coffee, and he ends up being one of her old classmates from college when she was in medical school. And he sort of asks her out, and they start this relationship. It doesn't really feel entirely right off the bat because Ryan is still in communication with Al, the man who raped Nina, as well as that kind of friend group. So there clearly is some red flags, but we kind of get this lovey-dovey romantic comedy montage of the two of them falling in love, and you start to hope that somehow the relationship can work out and somehow Cassie can have a positive relationship with a man in her life. After that, Cassie starts taking revenge on the people who were actually physically a part of the whole situation with Nina. So that includes a friend of theirs who didn't believe Nina, the dean of the school that didn't kick Al Monroe out, the lawyer that fought for Al and kind of pushed Nina away from pursuing the case at all, and then finally Al Monroe himself. So that is the plot synopsis for the movie Promising Young Woman. So now let's get into recommending some books based on different aspects of the film. The first aspect of the film I want to talk about is social commentary. The film talks a lot about relationships between men and women and this idea of the nice guy who seemingly can't do anything wrong. For that kind of theme, I'm going to recommend This Is Pleasure by Mary Gateskill. So here's the plot description for this one. The effervescent, well-dressed Quinn, a successful book editor and fixture of the New York art scene, has been accused of repeated unforgivable transgressions towards women in his orbit. But are they unforgivable? And who has the right to forgive them? To Quinn's friend Margot, the wrongdoing is less clear. Alternating Quinn's and Margot's voices and perspectives, Gateskill creates a nuanced, tragic comedy, one that reveals her characters as whole persons, hurtful and hurting, infuriating and touching, and always deeply recognizable. This is basically a very nuanced take on the Me Too movement and how affected other people in the circle of the perpetrator are by what the perpetrator has done. So there's a lot of discussion around Quinn's wife and how she has to deal with the fact that her husband has been sexually harassing people in the workplace. And it also kind of touches on how Quinn has manipulated other women into believing him instead of their own experiences and the experiences of women around them. It also talks about themes of power dynamics and how that plays into sexual misconduct and harassment in the workplace. Another topic that comes up in this book is the idea of the bystander effect. Many of the women in this book do not believe the other women who were harassed, and they definitely don't come to the aid of those women or speak out against Quinn. This kind of concept is comparable to what happens in Promising Young Woman when Cassie and Nina's friend Madison just does not believe Nina and believes that it's her fault for what happened to her because she was drinking. Unfortunately, because of the power dynamics of this book, women who genuinely don't have good things to say about Quinn do not speak out because they're concerned about losing their job or losing their credibility because Quinn has kind of enabled them to get a particular status. The idea of the nice guy is kind of a prominent feature of Promising Young Woman. The film talks about how much of a facade it is. This is sort of one of the more direct comparisons between the book and the movie. Quinn is seemingly a successful, nice guy. He is kind to women at times. He's well liked by a lot of people and he has climbed the social ladder. Therefore, people believe that he is incapable of doing anything wrong. This is sort of the same dynamic that happens to Al Monroe in the film. He seems to be an upstanding member of society. He's a doctor. So people believe that he is just incapable of doing the things that he's done in the past. And finally, This Is Pleasure also discusses, like I said before, how much people in the circle of the perpetrator are affected. In fact, it seems like they're affected a lot more than the perpetrator themselves. Quinn's wife, his kids, and the women around him are so much more affected by what has come to light about him than he is. We never actually find out if anything happens to Quinn or how the story really ends, which is similar to what happens in Promising Young Woman. Neither the book nor the movie have a clear ending in terms of what happens to the perpetrator. In Promising Young Woman, we don't actually get to see Nina because she has passed away, though it doesn't discuss how that happened, but Cassie is much more affected by what happened to Nina than Al Monroe is. He is out living his life, he's a doctor, he's about to get married, everything for him seems to be going so well, but Cassie is still stuck in the same place she was when Nina died. I think the idea that the people on the periphery are much more affected than the actual perpetrator is very important, and it's a very interesting idea to examine. So if you liked the social commentary of Promising Young Woman, my recommendation would be This Is Pleasure by Mary Gateskill. The next aspect of the film I want to discuss is the revenge fantasy. While the film does discuss a lot of social issues, it is also not just a drama full of these things. It also aims to use a classic boy movie trope and kind of turns it on its head and redefines it in order to suit what a woman would consider a revenge fantasy. So for this aspect, I have chosen The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. So this is a YA novel, and I will just read you the synopsis. Alex Kraft knows how to kill someone, and she doesn't feel bad about it. When her older sister Anna was murdered 3 years ago and the killer walks free, Alex uncaged the language she knows best, the language of violence. While her crime goes unpunished, Alex knows she can't be trusted among other people in her small hometown. She relegates herself to Shadows, a girl who goes unseen in plain sight, unremarkable in the high school hallways. But Jack Fisher sees her. Guilt over the role he played the night Anna's body was discovered hasn't let him forget Alex. He doesn't want to only see Alex Kraft, he wants to know her. And then finally, we have a character named PK, who is the preacher's kid who ends up befriending Alex. So in this book, we get sort of the female friendships, we get the relationship dynamic, we get the sense of guilt and the desire to make up for past wrongs. In this book, the teens are told directly many times by adults that drinking will lead to assault, and in fact, it sort of does in this book. It's sort of unclear if the adults mean that it's the girl's fault for getting drunk or if they're just kind of making their teenage daughters aware that men will use that moment of weakness to take advantage of them. So obviously the topics in this book are very heavy, but they do mirror Promising Young Woman quite a bit. So obviously there's a lot of similarities in terms of plot, but one of the big themes of this book that relates to Promising Young Woman is the idea of revenge. There's this idea in this book that anger, and even righteous anger, is completely insane on a woman. The author doesn't say this specifically in this book, but male revenge fantasies are not considered insane usually. In all sorts of media, there is this idea of the male revenge story, and I can't think of any time I've seen that kind of dynamic play out and the man being told that they're crazy. It seems to be generally accepted as something that men need to do to recapture their honor, and it's not thought of as insane or weird to get revenge on someone who has hurt you or has taken your honor. Whereas for a woman, it's completely insane and unhinged. They would have hurt my friend. They would have left bruises on her. Theirs would have been thumb-shaped and pressed into her waist where they held her down. Instead of a warm rush down her legs when she first stood in the morning, I drew blood from his face. He'll be mutilated, I know, and some might think me too harsh. But some men should be marked. I'm fit for that task, and I don't feel bad. Still, the question remains, what is wrong with you? I think that passage is particularly poignant because it kind of shows the dynamic between people thinking that she is completely insane, and on the flip side, her kind of explaining why she did it and saying she feels no remorse for it. And in that moment, she seems completely rational for what she did. I found a direct correlation between that scene and those topics and the idea of Cassie finally getting revenge on Al himself. As she's standing above him with a knife, he says, "You're insane," over and over again, and she says, "I really don't think that I am." Another parallel I found between the book and the film is a sort of heightened sense of reality. I think some of the intensity of this book comes from it being young adult because there is a lot of angst and it is very focused on being a teenager, so it felt very heightened to me because I'm no longer in the target age range and I don't have the same sort of angst to go off of. But either way, the emotions in this book, from love to infatuation to hatred, everything in this book is very intense and very heightened. And honestly, I feel the same way about Promising Young Woman. It is very heightened, even though a lot of what happens is within the realm of possibility. You don't have to suspend your disbelief so far, but there is a bit of that, and it does kind of play into that revenge fantasy trope where everything goes just a little bit too perfect in terms of the revenge up until the end. I think stylistically they were trying to emulate that sort of heightened reality of the revenge fantasy movie, and they did it very well. But that is something that is similar between the book and the movie, is just how heightened the emotions and everything that happens is. So if you loved the revenge fantasy part of Promising Young Woman, you would definitely enjoy The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. The next aspect of the film I want to talk about is the aesthetic. So Promising Young Woman has a very particular aesthetic, especially in the color palette. The movie uses a lot of light blue and light pink in the sort of lighter, more comedic, more romantic scenes, and even in the very emotionally charged scenes, which now that I think about it all sort of have feminine connotations, like being emotional or being romantic. All of those things sort of come back to that ideal or stereotypical idea of femininity and what girls like. And then on the flip side, the movie uses a lot of hot pink and black when Cassie is sort of getting revenge and going to clubs and all of those things. So I think the colors kind of contribute to the idea of intense femininity. Cassie is a character that is very feminine. She likes makeup, she likes pretty clothes, she likes doing her hair. She's definitely a stereotypical feminine woman. This is something that I think is very unique to this movie because typically we don't see this sort of intense femininity for powerful or violent female characters. Usually those kind of characters end up kind of having more masculine traits, like they have shorter hair or they dress in a more masculine fashion, which honestly sort of seems to indicate to the audience that traditionally masculine traits are the only way for a woman to be powerful and strong. But Promising Young Woman really flips that on its head. Cassie is a very feminine character and it really highlights that, and it doesn't make it out to be a bad thing. She isn't ditzy, she isn't stupid. She's very smart and cunning and interesting, but she still is very traditionally feminine. So my recommendation for the sort of color scheme and aesthetic and vibe of the movie overall would be Bunny by Mona Awad. Samantha Heather Mackey couldn't be more of an outsider in her small, highly selective MFA program at an elite New England university. A scholarship student who prefers the company of her dark imagination to that of most people, she is utterly repelled by the rest of her fiction cohort, a clique of unbearably twee-rich girls who call each other Bunny and seem to move and speak as one. But everything changes when Samantha receives an invitation to the Bunny's fabled smut salon and finds herself inexplicably drawn to their front door, ditching her only friend Ava in the process. As Samantha plunges deeper and deeper into the Bunny's sinister yet saccharine world, beginning to take part in their ritualistic off-campus workshop where they conjure their monstrous creations, the edges of reality start to blur. So while the subject matter and sort of plot of this book does not align with Promising Young Woman, there are a lot of crossovers in terms of the aesthetic. The girls in this book who call each other Bunny are very traditionally feminine. Their outfits are very frilly, they like makeup, and they talk to each other in a very cutesy, traditionally girly way. So this is a description of one of the girls. She looks like a cupcake, dresses like a cupcake, gives off a scent of baked lemony sugar, pretty in a way that reminds you of frosting flourishes. Tonight she wears a dress of cerulean blue patterned with sinuous white clouds and one of her many matchy cardigans. Blonde hair, freshly flat ironed. So you can see there is a very traditionally girly and feminine aesthetic to the girls in this book. But they are in fact very scary and they do a lot of scary things. So I think that relates a lot to Promising Young Woman in terms of Cassie being very feminine but also terrifying. Another interesting dynamic that comes up in both the book and the movie is the idea of dressing your age. The bunnies in this book are in their mid-20s at least, mid to late 20s. They're in an MFA program, so they're clearly fully fledged adults. And they sort of act as if they are 5-year-old girls. They talk to each other in this kind of baby voice. They dress in these very frilly dresses that you would only imagine a young girl wearing. And in the same vein, Cassie turns 30 within the movie, yet she still dresses in this very cute, pretty way that you would imagine a younger girl dressing. At one point, Cassie goes to visit the dean of her old school and she wears a suit and seems a lot more professional. We kind of have this preconceived expectation of someone who is Cassie's age to be wearing those kind of outfits instead of the very girly, pretty outfits that we kind of see as being younger. There's no reason for that, it just is kind of what society has molded for what women should be wearing when they're younger versus when they're older. So if the play with color scheme and the overall aesthetic of the film was your favorite aspect, I would recommend Bunny by Mona Awad. And the final aspect I want to throw in here as sort of a bonus is the title, Promising Young Woman. So this recommendation is Promising Young Women by Suzanne Scanlon. I think the title for both this book and the film are very intriguing and provocative, and that's why I want to talk about it. So thematically, the film and this book are not similar at all. So the blurb says, a series of fragmentary tales tells the story of Lizzie, a young woman who, in her early 20s, unexpectedly embarks on a journey through psychiatric institutions, a journey that will end up lasting many years. With echoes of Sylvia Plath, Suzanne Scanlon's first novel is both a deeply moving account of a life of crisis and a brilliantly original work of art. I think the central theme of this book would be the non-linear nature of memory, which is very fascinating, but really not similar to the film at all. However, I read this book in the hopes of being able to recommend it in this video, and I think I found a crossover between the book and the film. When I was contemplating the title of both of these works, I really got to thinking about what it means to be a promising young woman. In the book, the women that are considered promising young women seem closer to normal than the other women, or seem like they have the potential to get better and maybe might be able to contribute something to society after they get out of the institution. And this sort of brings up the question of, do people have intrinsic value, or is their value entirely based on what they can contribute to the world? And for a woman, does that mean contributing beauty to the world, or does it mean sex or motherhood? These are typically the things that are considered contributions that women can make to the world. In the film, Cassie often says that she could have of success if she wanted it. She says she could have a husband, kids, a fancy house, a good job if she wanted it, but she says that she simply does not want that. So I got to thinking about why the movie is called Promising Young Woman. What makes Cassie a promising young woman? Is the title even about Cassie? Is she a promising young woman because she could do great things? Is it the possibility of improvement? Is it the fact that she was very smart and then ended up not taking the route of being a doctor? Or is it that her attractiveness is too much for it to be wasted on not having a romantic partner or passing down her genes to her children? And it really begs the question, how is Cassie really valued? So if you found the title Promising Young Woman intriguing, I would highly recommend Promising Young Women by Suzanne Scanlon. That is all for today's video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed coming up with these recommendations and really picking apart each of these books and relating it to the movie. So if you liked this kind of video, I would be happy to do more videos like this. Just let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.